very shy kid. And so making with my hands gave me such a good outlet for my energy and gave me the opportunity to show something and gather that kind of connection and attention. And in a family of 6 kids, being a middle child, like getting any form of attention is a good thing. So that kind of just started that interest. In time, I just found that I loved the practice. I had a fantastic high school art teacher that gave us a wide base of experience with printmaking, painting, sculpture building, a little bit of pottery as well. So just in time, I decided that was like my love. Went off to Notre Dame to become an art major, which is kind of a rare thing on that campus. So kind of fun to enter into the process of making and trying to develop ideas behind things. At first it was mostly process-based though. I did a lot of figure work, figure drawing classes, figure painting classes, and I was a painting concentration at the beginning of things, but I started getting that messaging that I was made for something different, because even as I painted in like oil paints, my teacher said, no, you must be using acrylic, it's too textured, it's too heavy. I said, no, I'm using oil paints, but everything I did always had a lot of texture and substance to it. And when I got my hands in clay, it clicked. You know, that's like where I wanted to be, to build with that oomph. Started in with ceramics, and I realized at a point that I wanted to do something more with the figure. I worked a lot with gesture drawing just as warm-up and practice, and I wanted to work that into my process as well. Getting into kind of a sculptural focus allowed me to focus on the item and less on environment. And since I hadn't gotten into a good process of working out ideas just yet, just focusing on the item itself was very comforting for me and gave me more of a kind of complete connection there. So I really did kind of like working in that ceramics realm. Started trying to take vessel and make it figurative. So I would throw something on the wheel and start to manipulate and see kind of where it could go from there. But everything kept looking like the Venus of Willendorf. I don't know if you know that classic piece, and just seemed bulgy and all over the place and just didn't have the parameters and controls that I wanted. I've always been fascinated by anatomy, and like I said, one of my first art classes at Notre Dame was a figure drawing class that was taught by a priest. So that was kind of an interesting way. You know, you can see I do a lot with the nude figure, and he taught us very early on, very quickly, to build comfort with what is natural and beautiful. So when I started trying to make these vessels into figurative forms, I had to kind of think about what process would work best in that way and what technique would lend itself to it. I'd done a couple bust projects that were solid clay builds, and I hated having to hollow out after the project was done. I felt it impacted some of my detail, and it was just hard work. And in college, I was still trying to avoid hard work. So I decided, well, if I just build it hollow in the first place, then just like these pots, I'm good to go when I'm done. It's ready to be thrown into the kiln. So I started kind of working on a hollow build type process. And it basically is, for the most part, a coil structure process with a little bit of pinch effect. And it, to me, while it demands a little bit more patience in the build itself, it does really give you a good sense of the clay. It focuses you to kind of sit with the negative space as I build it up, and I can kind of show with a piece like this. This is my most recently fired. I kind of sit with the negative form as I build up the structure to kind of create the positive space. And what I'm working on is, like, I can lift this one, and Jennifer can attest to the fact that, say, this first figure is not so easy to do that with. I built more kind of internal structures on that one, walls inside, just to kind of help with the support. But in this last year and a half that I've gotten back into work, I'm figuring out ways to make things kind of more manageable in my build. Again, just a nice hollow build with the coil structure building up the walls. I will say it really has been a learning process in this last little over a year. After finishing college, I decided I didn't like the notion of starving. As we were just kind of talking about, sculptures don't necessarily sell easily. So I thought the application towards a life that included food regularly on the table would be going into teaching. And once I went into that direction, I kind of geared into general education and found myself busy in life, just teaching. A couple of years I was an art specialist, but that was, even at that time, was blended with being a math specialist, so I had a nice right-left brain balance going on. Basically raised kids and stepped away from art for about 25 years, except for the fun little projects and things that you do at home. Really stepped away, found myself an empty nester last fall, and forced myself to make good on the promise that I'd made to myself, that I'd get back into it. So last fall I started painting again, just thinking, okay, I'll start with two-dimensional, start with something that's a little more manageable in terms of equipment and time and space, and then by last winter got back into sculpture. So I think this piece is the third piece that I'd worked on last year, and it still represents, you know, kind of my intention, what I wanted to do with it, which was exploring form and the body's function. That's always been, like I said, creating a slight gesture. I'm very kind of influenced by those traditional classical forms, obviously. You know, when I was in high school and got to travel to Rome to see the paintings in the Sistine Chapel and the strong women and those just forms that had such presence and just demanded attention. Really kind of influenced by Michelangelo's strong form, but also trying to get into the passion of like a Rodin, kind of trying to get that type of emotion in. So starting just with practicing technique and building up that form, and I started working just because it kind of mirrored where I was in life, you know, kind of entering into the second act, you know, having raised kids and putting focus back on myself. This is part of what I call my Becoming series. And it speaks to women finding themselves, women getting comfortable with themselves and learning how to express themselves without, you know, feeling like they're neglecting something else in their life and doing so. So this was kind of a celebration of form in all its glory. The other pieces that are in this particular culture show kind of speak through a progression, if you will. These were completed in the summer, but the first one is a woman of youth, and the hands are kind of back, just kind of playfully behind her back, and she's kind of making more offering of self, and the eyes are kind of vacant and staring off into the future, kind of that wistful dreaming type situation where, you know, in youth, I call that one offering. You know, it's kind of like, well, here I am, and the world's going to define me by how they relate to me, by how they respond to me. The second one is a woman who's kind of more matured in her process, and she's wanting to find herself, but her hands are behind her back in this binding, like an organic binding. And it's because, you know, we face resistance. Sometimes people in our lives don't necessarily want to see our roles change. Sometimes they don't want to see our energies focused in a new direction. So you always face that kind of resistance. And sometimes it's even, like I said, it's an organic, it's a deer skin, it's organic. Sometimes the challenge comes from within, of how we're going to either promote our own movement forward or hold ourselves back. But that's kind of a mid-process of determining where one wants to bring oneself when you enter into that movement forward. And this one became the celebration of comfort. Who you can become and just say, world, here I am. And I don't need you to respond to me in a certain way. I'm just me. And I really enjoyed sitting with that Becoming series, mostly because then I found out Michelle Obama named her book after my art series, and I thought that was pretty cool, right? Coincidental. But so I want to still sit very much with the female form. Technique is kind of getting better on things, just because taking a ceramics class here, one thing that Rick in the department said is it's going to be good for you to hang out with potters, because you're going to learn more about structure, you're going to learn more about clay body and finishing. And he really wanted to emphasize that I could do more with the clay, and it can be lighter and airier at the same time. So that's when I was working on this one. I was really kind of trying to work with the clay body to build the form and build the structure. It's yet to be finished. These, I'll admit, I've been a little cowardly. I love the clean, the white, the porcelain look, and I've been a little bit cautious with some of my finishings on the larger pieces, and even these smaller ones, just kind of getting stuck with that classic pure white, kind of liking the stone look. This one is going to be glazed, and I had a good suggestion to hang with the white and maybe do some sandblasting, bringing back in that texture. I think that's sometimes why glaze doesn't sit as well with me, because I am such a texture freak. So the idea of sandblasting is really something I want to try, and it's going to have some tree branches coming out of it, kind of a return to nature, again, speaking to organic, how like as individuals we stray so far from what is natural for our being, and hopefully at a certain point in life we really do find a way to be in our own skin and very much connected to nature as we still live within a culture. I've got different examples of finishings that I have been trying, from a simple, straightforward glazed work, which again, I like on this one how this allows a little bit of the clay body to come through, gives it just a little bit of that depth and life to it. It doesn't, I mean, it has a cold element, but at the same time, if you spend a little time looking into it, you get some of that warm texture beneath the surface. So I like working with that. Also working with some cold finishing. This one is just acrylic paint. And so I'm just working with some cold finishing at home with watercolors and acrylics as well to see how they sit with the clay body, and try to, I'll admit, I feel like I have more control with the paint as substance to finish with. So part of me wants to still control process, and that allows me to do so. At the same time, my favorite results have been being involved in a soda ash firing last spring and a wood firing this past fall, and it's really where you give up control in the finish. And I've been really excited about the results, so I want to engage in again allowing myself to let the process make some choices for me. And I've been really kind of pleased with how those have worked out. Even my smaller pieces, I do a hollow build as well, and it becomes a very manageable way to create quick work and then spend focused time more on details.
Could you explain a little more about that technique? So
the soda ash firing, and Nick could probably go much more into depth on it, but basically I did use a slip, which gave the red tones that you see here. So it was bisfired and then fired again with the slip. When it goes into the soda ash kiln, which is a dedicated kiln, it only runs this process because basically, what temp does it get up to? Is it 2200 or about 2300 degrees? At that point, you basically toss into that atmosphere what is the soda ash, and that's made up of like bicarbonates and.
Some people spray it. It's baking soda.
I see. That's
so
the
at
reason.
that high temperature, it bonds on there and makes the glassy surfaces you can see.
So it basically turns into a gaseous cloud that circulates through the kiln, and where you'll get some strange like mustard halo kind of effects, and it was a little strange that I got so much of that mustard effect.
And that was not intentional.
It's a hopeful thing in the process that you get that kind of variation, and then where you see more of the glassy kind of grayish tone, that's where the soda ash hit hard and basically settled.
So it was more on the top part?
Yes.
What
was kind of fun with the piece itself is when they loaded the kiln, they loaded the male in front of the female.
I see.
And so the way at the top of the kiln, when it circulated through, it hit the male hard, and it really accentuated all of these cutouts that I put into his torso. So where it caught the soda ash, you get all of that nice definition being created there. But you can kind of see that's why she ended up with the soda ash bra, basically, because that was just kind of rolled. Yeah, the ash kind of cloud rolled over his shoulders that way. And then the wood fire, it's a similar kind of process in terms of it being an atmospheric chemical effect. These didn't have any glaze on them. The effect that it received is simply the wood ash as it burns at, again, what temperature do they keep the wood fire at?
2100 for a long time, but it's more the length of time allows all that wood ash to build on there.
And it builds and builds and builds to the point that it even got these glassy drips, which was an amazing result. But yeah, no glaze. It's all just the effect of the intense heat and the wood being released into the atmosphere within the kiln. And these two as partners kind of were placed in the kiln again in that way, hoping that they'd get kind of a color wave, kind of color effect. It didn't end up kind of having that deep wave kind of pattern placed on them, but just the fact that it just worked with the relationship of the piece, that they're bonded together, and yet there's some form of resistance between the two, and yet they share in this like kind of body of color and texture that unifies them. So finishing is going to become my next big frontier. I feel like I'm giving myself my own master's program. I haven't been to any master's training, but in terms of assignment technique and trying to build both in the build and the finish, now my next big frontier is more conceptual. And that's a current piece I'm working on. I happen to be a Catholic school religion teacher in junior high. And people are kind of surprised when they see all the boobs. Like, how do you sit with that? How do you balance that out? And I remind them that, of course, Adam and Eve were naked in the garden until they sinned. Shame comes about when things are misused, when things are mistreated. But I've started this piece. I'm working on this one presently. And with respect and sensitivity, I'm trying to build kind of a commentary on movement within the Catholic Church. She herself kind of has almost like a dome effect at the top of her head, and that just speaks to her as an individual being informed by the institutional side of the church. But in the chest here, I'm trying to build something that you'd have to be familiar with the faith experience itself. But in the Catholic Church, there's a cross-like item called a monstrance. And it has an opening in the center that a consecrated host that Catholics believe is the body of Christ can be exposed. So in exposition, this monstrance is used to show the truth and beauty and the true presence of God. I've been sitting with the fact that the church is changing or needs to change, that we're always going to have kind of a message that's delivered through this institutional body, and that the religious institution will still be that mechanism of delivery, but that the faith itself, that the individual, that we're back to vessels. The individual becomes the vessel of faith, the vessel of truth. And so I wanted to kind of speak to that monstrance-like look within her own chest, that she's the bearer of faith, that she's the one that will bring God to the world, that she is the one that contains that precious nature. So she's been informed and she holds on to that in intellect, but it only really becomes an important kind of effective element to the world when it's lived in the heart and brought out. Now, why she doesn't have hands, that's another issue. You know, she's not going to have arms. I'm not going to put that in, because teaching in my classes, we have the head, we have the heart, and then we have the hands of Christ that we'll speak to. And she's not there yet, because the focus is the movement from religious institutional structure to personalized faith within. And then I want to kind of continue sitting with those topics and themes, and again, challenge and respect. I think the fact that there's some sort of religious theming with nudity might be challenge enough right now. But I do that again with respect to what is the natural kind of intention for us in this life, that we have a body and we have a spirit, and they're meant to be wed together in health and function. And unfortunately, I think too often we're out of balance in that way, and we don't necessarily have both of those brought in unity to the world. And that's what I just want to explore some of those things, and now bring in elements of my own life to kind of sit together and start finding a way to kind of have that conversation through this item, again, through this vessel. I'm really happy to take any. I have one more piece at the end here, just a little wire gestural type piece. So when I'm wanting to have a little art fun without the mess of clay, I like to kind of play with that, and it just brings me back to my roots and my high school art teacher that used to warm us up in every class period with really quick gestural drawing. So the importance of kind of what I learned early on, having taken a 25-year hiatus and now jumping in with both feet, but you know, kind of building the new while maintaining kind of that old learning. It's been really important to me. So again, I'm happy to take questions.
Have you tried the raku coloring?
I have only once done kind of a simple raku process with just one vessel.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen results that I've been really intrigued by, and I think in time, that's another avenue that I'd like to explore.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it could bring to my process?
The metallic glaze on the surface that makes it kind of what your philosophy and what you're trying to speak about.
I like that. I've done one glaze piece that I brought like a silver foil into, again on surface to kind of distress and bring that metallic look.
Mm-hmm.
So that speaks to me. I like that idea.
And also that wire gesture form. Have you tried the shadow? What reflects on the shadow?
I've done a little bit when I've tried to improve with taking pictures of the work, and that's one of the things I get distracted by and kind of caught up in, the shadow effect. I've intentionally done like a corpus piece that I was really more focused on the shadow of the form that it laid across the wall than the actual corpus itself. So yeah, that's what sometimes I've wondered if as a sculptor you can get away with creating almost, and I don't want to say a secondary piece, but almost like photography of the work and the shadow effect and such as the primary art piece. So there have been some photos that I enjoyed the photo even more than the sculpture itself. So I'd always kind of thought about using two-dimensional sketching and planning to create the three-dimensional work. And now I'm kind of like reversing that, where I really do kind of feel like you can just utilize that three-dimensional and bring it into photography and get the focus back on texture and light and shadow. And yeah, so I'd like to play with that some as well. Time. I need to quit this teaching gig. But again, I go back to that original motivation that I like to eat. And I do like to have, you know, some food on the table. I haven't quite figured out how to sell this art thing just yet. But I'm having fun no less, and I'll just have to build storage onto the house, I guess. Actually, I went home over this past weekend, and it was really kind of fun to sit with some work that I had stored like in the basement from college. And one of my exercises was taking a few photos and then disposing of some things, letting those things go, and enter into the understanding that it's all been part of a building process, and that I can let go of the things of the past. Well, it was hard, but I'll say one of my hang-ups and one of the things where I was like, well, it's okay, I'll just go into teaching and I'll just shift in that direction. One of the things that made it too easy to make that choice was because I was always nervous about where I was going, nervous about what I'd made, worried about the judgment of how do you put this forth in the world and accept all the critique. And so some of that kind of pulled me back and made me very uncomfortable. And again, it's something about maybe getting to this becoming stage of life where I just feel that sense of comfort within my own skin, where I can let go of the things of the past and I can focus on the now and put it out there and just be more forward focused in that way. And it's been kind of more of a healthy exercise. Even last fall when I started painting, I wanted to do something else. I had done a self-portrait that I liked, but I wanted to paint something new. And I took some photos of it and then I painted over it. And I kind of, you know, internally applauded because I thought that the younger me could never have done that. I wouldn't have been able to let it go. I wouldn't have been able to kind of just catastrophically move forward. And I can do that more now. So I'm getting more of the idea of the process, and it's really freeing. Like, it's hard in that initial moment, and then you go, I don't have that baggage. So yeah, I've appreciated that as part of this this little journey I'm putting myself through. Mhm.
What kind of feedback are you getting? More commonly, say.
I would say really positive, and just especially with friends and family, just like, this is great. I had a lot of people say, I didn't even know you did an art thing. I'll say, yeah, I had it pretty well hidden here for the last 25 years. So it's fun that they're surprised. Again, I get that reaction of like, you're a religion teacher, what? I'm like, yeah, but there's nothing scandalous here, come on. So I'll admit, I enjoy that a little bit, just thinking that people find it, I don't know, a little naughty. And then I think there's like this great conversation that can pull us away from that puritanical notion and just say, let's get back to what's natural and pure and how things are meant to be. I think we live in a culture, and as part of this cultural show, where women are manipulated so badly from such an early age into rejecting what is natural and good about themselves, and they're really kind of pushed and forced into a different mold, or kind of the value system that's laid upon them is not necessarily what's best for them. And I like the idea of just kind of starting just with the concrete, It's in adolescent psychology. The focus is the concrete. What is it that you can see, and what can you do with it, and how do you accept it or how do you reject it? And just starting with the physical form, accepting who we are and loving ourselves in our bodies and finding form and function and healthful expression and emotion. That's all good stuff. So I like having that kind of conversation so that people, instead of going like, wait, junior high religion teacher, this doesn't click, then all of a sudden, kind of by the end of a conversation, it's worked in the direction of like, oh, that kind of makes sense. So I like a little bit of like breaking down that little barrier right there, because I think that's healthy to sit with what is natural and appreciate it. And that's not just trees, it's also the body. And we need more of that exercise in this culture too. And again, bringing in like the religious, I'll find if I post something on Facebook, anything that is religious gets a lot of easy reaction, and I think that's interesting and curious. So I get a lot of thumbs up with the Madonna and Child or St. Francis, and then it's a little more reserved on some of the others. So again, I just find it fun and curious to kind of put it out there and see where the response is. But I've had a lot of encouragement, and I appreciate that a lot, because I'm fighting that still shy nature, and that little fear wants to creep up of time, at times of like judgment. And so when people do kind of help with that support, it pushes you forward. And yeah, I'm deeply appreciative of all that. And of this space, because being engaged with the gallery and the shows here have really been super encouraging and very supportive. So thank you.
Good work.
Thank you. Trying to get that.
Is it possible for you to share about your background? How you grew up, or your parents' influence and things like that?
Sure. I grew up in St. Louis, and my dad was a practicing psychiatrist for 58 years. So very busy individual, but always like, amazingly brought a very calming kind of nature to the family life. I never brought that work home. People would say, does he analyze you at home? I said, no, I really didn't understand what he did for many, many years. And my mom, 6 kids, had been a nurse, just always had the systems in place. It was just amazing in terms of keeping it all under control and keeping all the moving parts going in the right direction. Cradle Catholic kind of experience, so Catholic schools and all-girl high school type situation that's very common in St. Louis, so not an unusual environment to grow in. But I'd say a very idealized bubble experience of life, which on the one hand let me be very comfortable in myself and in the things I wanted to explore, such a really strong foundation and even sense of like safety net around me. So I am deeply appreciative of that love and support that I always felt was very present. As I kind of grew, I was able to explore the things I was interested in. My parents were basically of the mindset that I choose my major, you know, so that they didn't say, well, what are you going to do with that? They let me have that time. And I really was always very appreciative of the fact that they gave us the freedom to decide where we wanted to apply ourselves in life. And we just met that with hard work. So it was a good balance. As time has moved on, you know, I've gotten more and more comfortable in that grounding and just really knowing how tremendously blessed I was with all those offerings, and just still even just having taken a visit to see family over the weekend with siblings. We had a few people in my family very, very involved in the arts, and seeing pieces of art around the house that my mom had collected. I think she had a great natural talent, and you know, in the busyness of life, like I experienced in the last 25 years, didn't kind of sit with it for a kind of in a focused kind of way, but I could see, you know, the appreciation that she had. And I remember just recently recounting with her, her mother had kept this little paper clay sculpture that she had done when she was young. And I remember thinking, when I saw that growing up, how precious that was, that item was kept in kind of a place of honor. And I think that influenced me a lot, to understand that what we create is very precious in this world, and it is a strong connection from like one spirit to another. So I held on to that, and it kind of came out recently, and I mentioned that to my mom, and I think that she got that and appreciated that she and her mom role modeled that for me. So when I went home just this past weekend and saw little pots and this one bust, I mean, she's got a bust up of a grad student at Notre Dame from way back when. She never knew the fellow. Some grad student with a ponytail, and we have his image in my home, but she's always had it kind of proudly displayed. So those kind of things are such concrete encouragements that...
What number child were you?
I was number 4 of 6, so true middle child syndrome. But yeah, so I've always had that encouragement, and then, you know, I married someone from college who recounted to me one of the first things that he found interesting about me was that I was an art major amongst all those business majors at Notre Dame. Like he had said to me at one point, like that day in class when you had to introduce yourself, and that's who you said you were and what you're about. He said that was really something that clicked and resonated with me. So my husband, and again, in this past year plus, I've taken time to focus on this, and at times it means time away from him, and he's still very supportive about it. And he's wondering again what we're going to do with all this stuff, you know. But again, he's really supportive of me having that time to kind of jump back in, and he sees that it's something I'm really enjoying, and so that support is also really appreciated. Did I hit on the right kind of thing that you're looking for?
But I think it's important to know oneself by understanding where they grew up, because it forms one's personality, and it comes out to what they do. So I'm just wonder about that.
Yeah, and it's funny, you know, it's funny, I will say I have the other middle child was also an art major, and she actually received her MFA, and she's extremely talented, again, busy with other things in life, hasn't spent a lot of time with the arts. I always kind of made an assumption that she like got what I was doing because she was so in the art realm. So when she started seeing me doing the torsos again, she said, you know, Mary, I have to be honest, those make me really uncomfortable. And I know, I was like, and she said, so in that way, I guess it's very successful, because an artist, you know, making people kind of feel something is a good thing. But it was just kind of curious to me, and I know part of it was, you know, in that very Catholic upbringing, that intense reservation about the body at times, you know. So, I mean, part of me is, I'm not rebelling, but I'm just questioning how that works. Why, if you believe that God's creation is beautiful and pure and good, do you have so much of a reserved control over it? So I'm exploring that and building comfort with it. And I think, you know, that would only be possible for me personally at this age in life after having had children and seeing the body in its kind of holistic way. So that's been a big part of the expression. And maybe she was more grossly uncomfortable just with the lacking, because I've had people kind of say, is this degeneration? I said, no, it's quite the opposite. My process, much like building with the clay, is formation. This is not destruction. I'm much more into the notion of formation. And not everything is fully formed, and the kind of just speaking to the fact that we're still in process and we're still learning. And I gotta admit, these are not self-portraits. We'll lay that out there. But it does speak to my personal, growth process, and that's where I feel like I want to start putting all these pieces and thoughts into action, and that to me in my own life is a formative experience.
Does it sit well with you that people might have their own interpretations or feelings, in response to them, or would you rather that they get what you're trying to say about it, or?
I think I'm pretty open, just because I've learned in life experience you can never control another's reaction, that all you can do is kind of put something out there honestly and hope that it's received. But a lot of times, other people's reaction will be more interesting than what I maybe intended. So I have to welcome that, and I'm kind of excited to hear back. I don't think I've been in a position just yet to receive a lot of that, and I'm kind of excited about maybe building to that. I mean, that's what was so fun about being in this particular show and having 3 pieces sit together as narrative. It was the first time that I'd been able to put things out in that way. So that challenged me, and I hope that it sat with others, and I really do kind of welcome. And even if, again, I would never intentionally want to offend, but at the same time, whatever tickles. And sometimes it's a little prickly, and I'd want to hear back, because it either will encourage me to maybe go more in that direction, or be clearer in the way. Being a shy kid, I've worked really hard to work on my verbal skills and to become more directly and clearly expressive. And I think I'm at a point where I need to do that visually as well. So right now, I'll admit that I probably don't have as clear a visual voice as I'd like to have. I want to kind of get that type of feedback to help influence my growth in that way. And that's why with this piece, it could have just been just another torso of a certain size. But I decided that I do want to kind of work a storyline into it and a challenge into it. So at times I'm sure I'll feel successful with it. At times I'm sure I'll flop, but I do kind of want to get that reaction and hear from people. That will help me in the end.
I think it also speaks about that body being a vessel, the things you put in it. And because you have that psychiatry background, you see it these ways. And that's what art is, not concrete, this is a new body. There's an idea behind the concept.
Yeah, and it's true, like life experience has taught me a lot. For a moment, I felt that I should have been doing this all along. Why did I give this up for 25 years? And the fact of the matter is, when I really think it through, things were being processed all the time. I was observing, I was thinking, I was feeling, and it was the right place and time for me to start putting all those things together. And so, no, I don't think I would be right here and now in my process without having taken that time and let life happen. So yeah, I'm actually glad things have gone exactly how there's no regret.
Yes.
It's actually like this is the way it was meant to be, and I'm just excited about moving forward with it. I now realize, like, truly, I will never be bored.
I don't think so, and I think you'll be very successful.
Well, thank you.
I think so.
I appreciate that.
Start showing exhibits in Seattle and just get some, start contacting people.
Well, it's easy to say. I fight that shy syndrome when I'm working at home alone and very comfortable here, with the good people at TCC. That's going to be the next big push, to try to get more out in the world I think people like Nick are really good at that. I'm gonna have to pick his brain.
I think the soda works really good because it looks like skin is growing on top of a muscle layer, and I like it better when it's not as finished. Like maybe less arms and less throat. To me, that would remind me more of the classical bust figure, whether it was broken at some point or not. But I think it would also be interesting to keep going with what's already there in a different material. Like not just branches, but something that you could add to the clay that would show like the next step of a process. Or even something that to juxtapose the figure bearing itself with the shame, you know, that it had to come through. You know what I mean? Like a figure that corresponded with these ones that was less open, and you know what I mean, to show where it had come from. Because I think the process, your process shows a lot, is a good opportunity to show that, like where it's not destroyed, but it does look unfinished, you know, whether it's the surface or the form itself.
And so instead of a hard cut off, like having another material to show the underlayering coming forth.
Even glass or something.
I was
that
gonna
looks
say,
weird.
in talking with Bernie, you know, that's
Be
one of
really
the
cool,
suggestions
yeah.
that he's really, you should definitely work glass into it. And right now, this is a piece that goes with a frontal and rear torso piece that I'm going to be working onto metal armature with some internal structure
That'd be cool.
that will add, you know, again, add that other medium as well as some internal layering. So I do. That's where I know things get more exciting.
Yeah.
Like right now, some of it feels more like exercise. And I think either in concept or in wedding materials together, that's where I will actually progress. And the work will
I
actually
like
create.
how futuristic that looks.
Which one?
With your, you know, it's almost like a Arant figure, but it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily come off as Catholic. It looks like
Okay.
futuristic, like Black Panther.
Okay, see, I was trying to walk a few lines with it, so thank you, because I didn't want to have it so locked in. I kind of want, and I was even questioning, like with this Duomo type shape on top, if I would disguise it a little bit more or really play it out
It reminds
architecturally.
me of the Pope's hat. So
Yeah, the miters. Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of playing with where that would go. But what was funny is being home, I saw a piece that my dad had in his office at home. And it was just this like old Egyptian, like Nefertiti type, that long neck, that chin out. And then I'm ignorant as to what to call the hat that she was wearing.
Right.
But I thought, oh my gosh. I think I'm realizing that over all these years I've taken these visual snapshots and now they're coming out, and it's only when I'm confronted with it I go, oh, that's where that came from. So I'm stealing ideas left and right. I'm buying into maybe that Picasso thing of like good artists like borrow and great artists steal. Maybe that's where I'm starting to, but yeah, I do.
You don't really have to intellectualize that either. But the modern, strong Italian sculpture is the comic book for somebody who's going to look at it today. You know what I
That's
mean?
a cool way to look at it. Yeah, that it's pop culture in some way or another, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, that's where I'm kind of trying to get more comfortable, because whenever I put more than just the figure out there, that's when I get cautious and I get, again, there's going to be more critique. If I'm giving something to someone to think about, then I'm going to get a response. Am I ready for that? And I've decided I am. I'm going to steel myself.
Of course, because everybody's going to see something, they're going to answer their own, what they see. Everybody can see something totally different than what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you want.
And I think that's where I never have realized that putting art into the world, like when I was younger, I thought, well, if I put it out there and someone compliments me, that feels good. And I kind of thought that's what it was about. Like, you know, if I have a talent and someone notices it, that's something that makes you feel good. And now I'm realizing that if you make something and put it into the world and someone has their own personal response to it, it's actually quite the opposite. It's not expecting anything back, but it's a giving, and it's a gift.
Experience in life. So it couldn't be blue because that's not your experience. Maybe you're not a product store. It couldn't be glass, or it has to be white, or it has to be big, but nobody can tell you how to do it, only you can.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can change their mind because they see something different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Again, at the same time, it's so great to get the encouragement and an idea track in place because I need that, I like to hear, and I need that little push forward. It'd still be easy for me to fall back in. I'm like, well, I don't have that much time, or I don't have the much space, or I just don't have the right materials. And so hearing something like really creative gives you that motivation. I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to try it. I like the idea of getting out there with different mediums.
Wax. Start with
I
wax.
started to study some encaustic waxing techniques and finishing.
You can melt it off if you don't like it.
Can I tell you, over the past weekend, had to keep nephew a little busy, a very energetic, 7-year-old nephew busy, and we were eating Baby Bell cheese, and I took the wax and
Little wax.
yeah, I just, softened it up and showed him how you can make little sculptures out of the Baby Bell wax. And I was really kind of surprised, like, I've done that for years. Never thought about the first time I had done it. I just always did that with my kids. And everyone around the table was like, what are you doing? Well, how did you even think of that? I'm like, it's wax. You sculpt with wax. What do you don't just, I said, we just throw it away. I said, what are you talking about? You don't throw this away. You can play with it. And it was great.
Yeah.
With the bronze.
Yes, and I've only done one simple casting process. And at the time it was wildly frustrating because I felt like it damaged the positive. But I am excited about that as well, about maybe taking the sculpture class here and working a true wax mold process. And that would, again, another one of those things that I think would be a good direction and give me a lot of ideas. And just, again, the product and metal. I haven't had that before. That'd be so exciting just to hold it, so yeah.
I think it looks fine bare as well.
Thank you.
Without
Yeah.
the glazing.
Yeah.
I love porcelain. Again, there's something about speaking to that clean, pure, like I believe skin is, so it kind of works, but I do recognize at the same time you can get beyond just the figure form and get into she got a lot of crystallization on her torso, and I like the invitation to look up close at that other dimension. So yeah, this is good, and I just want to keep making, so I get to have fun with it all.
Yeah.